please come in. Make yourself comfortable. So just take a seat here. Thanks, Mr. Smith, for coming over to today's meeting after such short notice. So as we discussed on the phone, you were quite concerned about your son's well-being, and from our side, we sort of noticed how Dylan's been failing his grades lately in a lot of his subjects, except for drama. And so after discussing it with my colleagues before the meeting, we have some interventions that we're ready to propose to you and your son. But before we do that, is there anything else that you'd like us to know regarding your son? Just so that we can get that out of the way first.
Yeah, thanks for being on with me today, Mr. Son. As I said on the phone, I'm quite concerned about Dylan, especially his marks. I really want him to succeed academically.
Yeah.
Next year he has a scholarship exam to go to the US, and we really want him to go there. We think it's a really good opportunity for him. So I'm willing to take any advice you can offer just to help him get there.
A framework that we can use to help us understand what is happening with Dylan is the biopsychosocial model. This model takes into consideration biological, psychological, and social factors and the interrelation between them that may influence behaviors within adolescence.
When examining Dylan's well-being through a biological standpoint, we should refer to the changes happening in his body's endocrine system, where pubertal changes begin in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has profound and diverse effects on physiological motivation and functioning in areas such as eating, drinking, and sexuality. Pubertal changes initiate once the hypothalamus begins its production of gonadotropin-releasing hormones. Here we see two graphs showing the relationship between the height and weight and the years of age. Evidence indicate that an increase of this product happens once a threshold level of body fat is reached, as fat cells produce the protein and leptin levels needed to signal the hypothalamus to produce. On the contrary, however, if the adolescent is thin due to malnutrition, illness, or extreme exercise, their puberty is more likely to delay, which may very well be Dylan's case. The social emotional system is at its peak during this adolescent stage, while the cognitive control system is far below but steadily growing. This may explain Dylan being under the influence of hot cognition, which refers to one's thinking based on their emotional states. At this stage, Dylan's social-emotional network is most likely hijacking his decision-making, leading to more irrational, low-quality, and biased decisions. Furthermore, Dylan's academic performance could be explained through the effects and result of synaptic pruning, a process in which the overproduction of synapses gradually diminishes as only a handful of neural pathways are being selected and specialized, while the rest are either abandoned or ignored. This is shown through Dylan's possible interest in drama, where he is evidently excelling in, while on the other hand, poorly performing in maths and sports. In addition, myelination is another process to consider in Dylan's neurological growth, as the myelin sheaths blankets around the neural pathways, which speeds up the brain's electrical signals from one nucleus to another. This leads to executive functioning over the course of adolescence, and thus can indicate hints of Dylan's interest, strengths, and weaknesses in both academics and leisure. Both these processes honor the use it or lose it principle, which refers to synapses that are used remain, whereas those that aren't disappear. Due to these factors, some of the concerning effects may include high levels of stress, which may lead to depression. Another is high delinquency. And third, but not least, with maturation occurring at any stages, Dylan may also be in the lines of substance abuse.
Adolescent problems can manifest in two ways: internalizing and externalizing. Externalizing problems can result in adolescents in the late teens and early 20s to have higher rates of disease, injury, and death resulting from risky behavior. Research shows that vehicle accidents are the leading cause of death in adolescence. Also elevated are the rates of sexually transmitted diseases. These causes of death or injury are the highest in adolescent years, a time where cardiac output, reaction time, strength, and the immune system reaches its peak.
Looking at the psychological aspects that may influence Dylan's behavior, it is important to consider the difference between psychological traits and states. Psychological traits refer to patterns of behavior that are usually part of someone's personality. An example of one of these is a sensation-seeking trait, which is characterized by the need to experience new things and is often associated with risk-taking. This is one possible explanation towards Dylan's behavior. Dylan might be seeking new experiences and taking more risks. Personality states, on the other hand, are temporary states of mind or temporary behavioral states. A classic example of this is musicians who normally may be quite introverted, but when performing are completely different and extroverted. Dylan may be experiencing a similar effect where he involves himself with risky behaviors due to temporary states of mind when he is in the presence of peers who may also be engaging in the same behavior. Linked to this are social factors that may be influencing Dylan's actions. An important thing to consider for adolescents are friend groups and who a student associates with. Typically, friend groups have a homogenizing effect where a group of friends tend to become more like one another and do similar things. This can have a negative impact when your group of friends engage in risky and rebellious behavior. For Dylan's case, it is therefore important to consider whom he is associating with and whether these peers are having a negative homogenizing effect on Dylan. Parents can also feed into this effect, where neglectful parents will tend to have children who are associated with high risk-taking. Although Dylan's parents show concern for his well-being, excessive high pressure from them for Dylan to succeed academically can have a negative impact on Dylan's behavior. Finally, a child's environment can also have an effect on behavior. A community which has many ecological assets, such as sporting facilities or youth centers, will tend to have less kids engaging in risky behavior. A strategy to help Dylan is to work on Dylan's strengths. Despite Dylan's decline in other subjects at school, Dylan has shown to continually excel in drama. This should be encouraged in order to promote positive outcomes in his life. Another strategy that can be implemented is to involve Dylan in extracurricular activities. Research done by Vivian in 2010 showed that a significant factor that influenced youth crime rates in Bourke, New South Wales was that the kids were bored with nothing to do after school hours. To combat this, involvement in extracurricular activities such as sports, classes, or other recreational activities will have positive effects in keeping children occupied and not engaging in risky behavior. For Dylan, some activities could include drama classes, recreational basketball, or picking up a musical instrument.
Several environmental factors could explain Dylan's change in behavior, but first, we need to get into the nature versus nurture debate. For many decades, scholars have debated the relative importance of biology in the environment and human development, with some claiming that human behavior can be explained just by biological factors, nature, whereas others have claimed biology is irrelevant and human behavior is a product of their environment, nurture. Eventually, scholars agree that both biology and environment play a key role in human development, about 50-50. In dissecting this concept, I'm going to discuss the genotype environment's effects theory, which states both biology and environment can make essential impact on adolescents' human development. There are three types. Passive genotype, where both genes and environment are simultaneously provided for the individual. Evocative genotype, where persons' inherited characteristics evoke response from others in the environment. And active genotype, where people seek out environment that correspond to their genotypic characteristics. In his early adolescent phase, Dylan was experiencing the passive genotype environment interactions. The inherited genes from his parents and the highly expectant but positive environment they created for him allowed Dylan to excel at basketball, mathematics, and drama. However, as time went on, he, as well as his surroundings, started to change. Being a late maturing adolescent, Dylan finds himself no longer in the basketball team, which has led him to being withdrawn and no longer associating with pro-social peers. Here, you could say that Dylan experiences interactions within the evocative genotype environment, if we assume that Dylan's then peers have been treating him differently, and thus have steered him into a negative environment. Now that he has lost a sense of belonging, Dylan has sought out active genotype environment interactions, unfortunately with bad influences, as he engages in high-risk behavior and is now performing poorly in many of his school subjects. However, at the same time, the effect this is having on his emotional state has allowed Dylan to continue to perform well in drama. According to Vygotsky, working in mixed ability groups can play an important part of the cognitive developmental process. His influential ideas advocate the use of collaborative learning where individuals have different levels of abilities. These ideas include zone of proximal development, which is the gap between what adolescents can accomplish alone and what they are capable of doing if guided by an adult or more competent peer, and scaffolding, which is the degree of assistance provided to the adolescent in the zone of proximal development. Children and adolescents learn best in mixed ability groups, where the instruction they are provided is near the top of the zone of proximal development, so that they need more assistance at first but gradually become more capable of performing a task on their own. Scaffolding should also generally decrease as children become more competent at the task. Dylan can highly benefit from mixed ability groups, which can help improve his performance in class, as well as provide a positive support environment that may help him associate more with pro-social peers.
For schools in our state, the New South Wales Department of Education follows through the GRIP method in order to assess the students' status of mental health and well-being. The same thing applies to Warriors of Dylan's academic performance, in which teachers and staff can apply the SMART goal method to assist him in strategizing and executing his academic goals through a more realistic and measurable manner. Alternatively, should Dylan nor his parents feel the need, they can also refer to phone applications such as the Mindfulness app, as well as the Resilience Hotline, in order to address their struggles through confidentiality and at their own pace.
Overall, the biopsychosocial model is used to help us understand the complexity behind Dylan's change in behavior and how it is affected by many interrelated factors. Strategies such as the GRIP method, mixed ability groups, and helpful phone apps can be used to help Dylan and the struggles he is facing. Ultimately, a strong support network from Dylan's parents, teachers, and other relevant professionals are needed to best care for Dylan's well-being and promote positive behaviors.
Throughout the semester, I now have a better understanding of how difficult and complex the age of adolescence can be for everyone. But amongst all the theories that I've learned along the way, Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development, particularly in the fourth stage, which is formal operations, refers to how people can develop the ability to think of abstract concepts as well as logically testing the given brief or hypotheses. This also refers to how a child can build and construct a mental model of the world as they age through time, which is heavily dependent on the social interactions of the environment that surrounds them. Supporting this thinking, Vygotsky's proximal zone of development refers to how a learner can achieve and learn on their own without the guidance of a mentor or teacher, versus what that learner can actually achieve and learn on his own while being guided by the mentor or teacher. While knowing this, Vygotsky and other educators, including myself now, believe that it is important to provide the teachers the guidance required within their ZPD and to encourage optimal learning, such as the core concepts and skills and strategies that they require in order to pursue the given assessments that are given to them. In terms of the school context, I myself, as a design and technology teacher, should take into consideration George Miller's Magic 7 concept, which talks about how students can only uphold 2 to 4 bits of information while taking a long time to actually process these information, which by the way takes time and is prone to mistakes. So one way to address this is by scaffolding the concepts and knowledges I'll be providing within my lesson, so that it is easy for students to actually understand it bit by bit and to apply this concept or these knowledges through practice. Of course, this will be done before they actually pursue their own topics and assessment in their stage 6 assessments. While on top of this, designers should also have the skills to work with one another. So I think that collaborative learning activities should also be within the lesson plan, so that the classroom is more student-centered rather than teacher-centered. And that way, students would be able to find an effective way of improving each other's learning, while able to build upon their resilience. On top of this, I of course as a teacher would be supervising these activities to ensure that the students are participating and engaging in the discussions, while at the same time moving towards the right direction of their learning and well-being.
So doing the adolescent development and teaching unit has helped me understand the tumultuous period that teenagers go through during high school. It's allowed me a retrospective insight and understanding of my own adolescence as well as my peers for reference. It's especially important to note the heightened sensitivity and proclivity for risk-taking during this time for them due to factors such as hormones and brain development, which is affected through the biopsychosocial sphere. Because of this, it's really important to practice empathy and sensitivity when dealing with teenagers to really maintain that positive support system. And if a student happens to lose their way, their parents and caregivers depend on us as mentors and peers of the student to help set them straight. Concepts I find particularly interesting include the use-it-lose-it principle, through myelination and the strengthening and pruning of neural pathways. I now know the specific content and knowledge that students are truly interested in will start developing during adolescence, and therefore it's my job and my responsibility to help them in the direction to go wherever they want to go. Additionally, concepts such as extraneous cognitive overload and short and long-term memory have made me realize why I found learning in the classroom to be quite difficult, as well as retaining that knowledge. I understand as a teacher that I have to teach these students in an effective and engaging manner within a positive environment to successfully facilitate learning. For example, in my KLA of music, I try to make each lesson experience cater to the students' interests, like learning about artists or music that they enjoy, and incorporating that into lesson activities. Furthermore, I can utilize Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, complemented by scaffolding, for example, when they're doing a musical practice like learning an instrument, to enrich their learning and collaborative learning environment, as well as facilitate a positive learning support system. In short, adolescence is an incredibly messy period for everyone, but it's very important in determining what kind of person they become in the future, and it's my job as a teacher to help navigate them through this safely and to try and make the experience enjoyable and enriching for them.
The unit Adolescent Development and Teaching has given me a holistic view of adolescence and what is happening to a child who is going through this period. When people think of adolescence, behaviors such as risk-taking, rebellion, and moodiness are typically expected, but feeding into this are a range of developmental factors that provide insight. One factor that has stood out to me is how different parts of the brain develop at different rates. Specifically, in adolescence, the socio-emotional network develops faster than the cognitive control system in the brain. A significant characteristic of the socio-emotional network is the need to seek peer approval. This explores why adolescents tend to engage in more risky behavior, especially in the presence of peers or contexts of hot cognition and high arousal. With this in mind, as a future teacher, one thing I will need to consider are who students are associating with and whether the presence of these peers are negatively influencing their behavior at school. Application of the GRIP method may also be suitable in future teaching practice, specifically if there is a need to involve other professionals, such as the school counselor, to best care for student well-being. The unit has also taught me about the limitations of human memory, which will influence my future teaching strategies. A person's short-term memory is only able to hold about 5 to 9 bits of information, or process 2 to 4 activities at a time. It is therefore important for teachers to minimize wasteful or extraneous load. One thing I'll consider as a pre-service science teacher is the form of split attention, where students are required to pull information from 2 different sources from 2 separate locations. This places excessive load on the student and may result in them missing information. Minimizing this by simply incorporating information in one physical location or including information within diagrams rather than next to the diagram are things I will practice in my future science classes. Overall, I've really enjoyed this unit, and as a science teacher, I've specifically enjoyed the ideas on brain development and how this influences behaviors in adolescent individuals.
In this unit, some of the greatest takeaways to implement into my own teaching practice are the theories of cognitive load, caused by intrinsic load and extraneous load. This is caused by the limitations of the working and short-term memory. Research shows that teaching instruction that is designed around how the human brain processes information is most effective. Since the average human brain can only process an average of 4 pieces of information at one time, it is important to structure teaching around these processes. Also connected to the idea of cognitive load is schemas representing knowledge, which can come in the form of declarative, procedural, conditional, and cultural knowledge. This is particularly interesting to me as all forms of schemas and knowledge is used in the key learning area of music. Often concepts or skills such as sight reading and composing have high intrinsic load as a result of high element interactivity. It is therefore important for my teaching practice to consider cognitive load and set high but realistic expectations of student performance. Another useful learning is the idea of resilience. Promoting resilience rather than treating mental illness. By viewing mental health through the lens of positivity, we can help students develop a greater sense of well-being and the ability to thrive academically. This is particularly important in music, as a lot of people have trouble with anxiety when performing, especially when they are the center of attention. Developing resilience and well-being in an environment that supports it can be crucial for students to express themselves more creatively and freely.